Welcome to Women Disrupting, a podcast amplifying the voice of women who are disrupting the status quo to create a more equitable, united, and peaceful world. Today's guest is someone who's been shaping the leadership landscape for over 2 decades. Katy Mason is a pioneering leadership coach who's been on the front lines of coaching since early 2000. Well before it became a mainstream leadership tool. She has helped create one of the UK's first corporate coaching cultures at O2, where she built a 54-strong coaching team and later transformed how leadership development was delivered across the business. Katy is the founder of Another Way, her own coaching consultancy, and she also works with the CVP Group as a skills coach, training leaders to become qualified coaches themselves. A passionate advocate of the challenging coaching methodology by Ian Day and Dr. John Blakey, Katy believes in striking a powerful balance between empathy and accountability, what she calls the yin and yang of leadership. Her mission is to normalize coaching as a superpower for high performers and to create more inclusive, self-aware leadership cultures across industries. Get ready for a conversation packed with insight, honesty, and practical tools you can use right away. Katy, welcome to Women Disrupting podcast. How are you this morning?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. Really looking forward to having a conversation today with you, Yasmin.
So am I. Now, obviously, Katy, we work together, and I know you as a fantastic skills coach and a coach, but you also are doing lots of fantastic work with your colleague Wendy with the Rise program. Is that right? What it's called with
that's
women,
right.
With women leaders. So I guess just talk to us a little bit first of all about your own personal journey, because you've been coaching since 2000, which is probably about 25 years. And coaching feels quite new. So to have a really experienced coach like you talk to us about the changes you've seen is quite insightful. So just talk to us a little bit about what got you into coaching at such an early stage in the kind of coaching world, because it was just evolving then.
In the year 1999 actually, a role became available for a team coach. And I didn't really know what a team coach was then. It was more like supervising the team with a leader at that particular point. And then in 2003, we started to set a coaching culture up, which again, very early adopters of this. We got an external provider into the business to support us. But what we did was we created 3 levels of accreditation, a bronze, silver and gold. And I got the role as being a coaching leader on there, which I was delighted about. How did coaching come about? Coaching sort of found me. People within the business were saying, could they sit and could they have a chat with me because they wanted to talk something through, or they were perhaps looking for a career opportunity. And after they'd sat down with me, they really felt that they'd got clearer and they'd got some actions. So yeah, it was kind of an innate skill in me, I guess. So when I started being a coaching leader in 2003, we grew 54 coaches on our coaching team to service the business of a few thousand leaders at the time, about 2,000 leaders. And at that particular point, our coaches were doing an amazing job. But in 2005, they'd done such a good job that the leaders had become managers sat behind the desk. And if the advisors needed any support, they'd ring into our coaching team and ask could they book a session with the coach, because they'd got that trust, they'd got that motivation and encouragement, and they knew that it was a very safe space to work with the coach. And so we took the option to disband the coaching team, and we did a 90-day a consultation period. And what was so lovely was the coaches, because they were being coached to get their next roles like leaders or go outside the business, they continued to hit their coaching objective of coaching 70% of the time because there was no threat to them. Whereas the leaders sat behind the desks, they were very insecure and confused about why they were being asked to coach at the time, because they were saying the contracts hadn't said that they were being coaches, but it did actually say 70% of your time you would be coaching. So we then taught the leaders to coach the teams, which was, a much better strategy to go with. So I did that. So therefore, I coached myself out of a role and went into learning and development, and realised that within learning and development, coaching niched nicely with that to get the best from a training coach approach was becoming more popular in kind of 2005, 2006. So I was in learning and development for a while with a team of designers and deliverers. And then I went into operational leadership back into the business, and got encouraged to run a training coaching program for the leaders because they wanted more development with more of a coaching approach. Yeah, and that's kind of how it evolved. In 2013, I then took redundancy and decided I was going setting up my own coaching business called Another Way, which I've now had for 12 years.
Wow, what a journey. And you were talking earlier about how you've used these coaching skills that you've acquired over time to work with women to rise to senior positions, because there are many barriers for women in the workplace. We've just been looking at some data together, and I just noted down that traditional gender roles place women in domestic spheres only, hindering entry into male-dominated roles, especially in the corporate sphere, because that was and still is to some extent dominated by men. So tell me what you've done with your coaching skills to support women to rise to more senior positions in male-dominated spheres.
Well, as you know, Yasmin, it always starts with yourself. So I had to look at myself, and, I'd kind of gained this belief that to rise quickly in a commercial world or, in a corporate world, it seemed that males seemed to do that with more ease. And, I remember having conversations with my senior leaders at the time, and they were kind of sharing with me that they felt that I needed to increase that ability to challenge, that ability to be more directive with people. And I come from, kind of my own development style is more empathetic and more of that support. And I realised that at the time. But what I didn't quite often like the way that, kind of that challenge was brought in. It seemed to be more about tell, and still seemed to be more about that command and control style. So in 2012, I was on LinkedIn and came across the concept of challenging coaching. And I realised, and this was the big shift in my mindset, that this challenging coaching strategy had been put together by now Dr. John Blakey and Ian Day. And there were two guys. And it was really interesting, Yasmin, because I saw this video of Dr. John Blakey on YouTube, which he's having a conversation and said that he was walking down the corridor of a big corporate business that he worked as an executive, and the CEO was walking the other way. And he said if there'd been a broom cupboard that day, he would have loved to have jumped into the broom cupboard, because the CEO went, "How's it going, Blakey?" To which John went, "Yeah, it's going great. I've saved, the company's millions of pounds." And after a little bit more of an in-depth conversation, the CEO actually said to John, "The trouble with you, Blakey, you're too effing nice," he said, actually, without saying the actual word. And John at that moment turned around and went, "I'll show you who's too effing nice," basically. And something switched in me, and it made me realize it wasn't a gender thing for me. It wasn't me being a female, that also it was really endearing to learn that, my male counterparts in the coaching world had felt like this as well. And that's what got me into my passion for challenging coaching, because it made me realize that I could own in on using my supportive skills. However, I could learn how to enhance my challenging skills, but in a way that kind of was authentic to who I was as well, and to do that with care, which is what I've done.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying for sure. It's the quality of being nice, the support part of challenging coaching, we were alluding to the yin yang, the yin element, and which is linked to the feminine. And feminine isn't a biological sex thing. Feminine's like an energy, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's this attribute, correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, that's deemed in the corporate world as weak, whether it's a man or a woman who possesses it.
Yes, yeah, it seemed more like, this will kind of slow down getting the work done, or, that it might allow people to be less accountable, this yin energy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is close. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is it's harder to value and give that yin energy credibility in the workplace when actually the yang energy, the more masculine, get things done, action orientated energy is more revered. However, we don't want to lose either of them because they both have their advantages. So what does challenging coaching do, Katie, to calibrate, you said, or bring these energies together?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if we use the analogy of a big mighty oak tree, it needs the roots to support it, and it needs the sunlight to challenge it to make it grow. So, we work with the challenge support matrix, and the challenge support matrix was first came to light by Nevitt Sanford, and they were researchers that worked in the learning environment, and they realised to get the best from students, they needed to bring a balance of support and challenge, which got the students into their peak performance zone. And it was most recently redeveloped by a person called Deleuze. So we look at both elements of having support and challenge. Now, for example, if I was just to over support somebody with my empathetic kind of style, it would lead them to be either, if I give too much support, it'd put them in a cozy club state because I'd hold them and I'd be doing the work for them. Whereas if I don't give them any support and I give them no challenge and I just step back as a leader, and some leaders still do this and don't know the people, you're moving into that place of inertia, apathy, where nothing is happening. But then if we give too much challenge, so we've got too much of that yang energy and we're over challenging too much, we put people into the risk of going into stress zone. And so the sweet spot is to get people the balance of support and challenge so that they can be in that peak performance zone. So we do know from research that if you offer a supportive and challenging approach, and you are kind of fluidly moving between both of those to give your person what they need and want when they need and want it, that's when you will really see the great results.
It makes so much sense, but I reckon it's one of those things, isn't it, that is easier said than done. So can you give our listeners some specific examples of what might too much support look like from a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said earlier, I work with a lot of women execs, and women execs quite often will want to be nice to their people and offer all of that support, and sometimes be over giving of things. So sometimes if somebody's asking for, say, special conditions, that leader might kind of keep being the yes person because they don't really understand how to say no to that person, and they might feel like that they'll offend that person, and then that person will lose motivation. And that's one example that I see it. Or to the opposite sex, sadly, whereas when they're being kind of asked of by the male counterparts, that they're likely to say yes, yes, yes. It was interesting because I was listening to a podcast a few months ago with Mel Robbins, and she was saying that quite often, say, for example, you wanted to go and see your child's summer concert at school, a female parent might go into the office and say something like, is it okay if I take, Friday afternoon off for a couple of hours to go and see my child in the concert? They ask for permission, which potentially could have the answer back of, well, we're a bit busy. Whereas our male counterparts, using the yang energy, would go in and position that totally different and say, I'm just letting you know that on Friday afternoon I won't be here. And again, it's quite often how we use our phrases and how we use our words to get what we need and want. softer feminine energy will be more concerned about everybody, whereas the male energy is kind of, for me, tapping into more of, this is my directness, and this is now about what is truly important to me in life.
Yeah, no, that's a really good, really interesting one, that, isn't it? Can we stick with the examples and maybe just dabble in a very little bit of role play? Because I think one of your key strengths is really balancing the yin and the yang energy when you're trying to manage the expectations of your colleagues, teammates, stakeholders. So say, for example, you were a leader and you had an employee who wasn't meeting a deadline, but this was a repeated incident, and you were in a one-to-one. What kind of things might you say to that employee to support them but challenge them?
Yes, it's really interesting because, again, using the support challenge matrix, there are different phrases that we would use in each of the different quadrants. So as I've said to you there, with no support and no challenge, we're in that inertia, apathy. And, very much so, that kind of leader, for example, they might say something like, okay, what do you want to talk about today? Whereas, again, if you are over supporting somebody, you might say, oh, it sounds like you've had a difficult few weeks. How's that making you feel, and going around them emotions? But essentially, what you're doing is you kind of repeatedly letting them off the hook. If you're over challenging them, for example, you might say, this is just not good enough. Whose time are you wasting? We've had this conversation, and then that can stress people. However, if we're going into that support challenge matrix, we're coming from a place of where we're able to be transparent ourselves and say, for example, this isn't an easy conversation for me to have right now with you, Yasmin. However, I don't want to let you off the hook. So again, it's using our language. How committed are you really to this role? So it's about holding that accountability. However, what we do in challenging coaching, you've asked me there, if I'm the leader and I've got that repeated behaviour of somebody not achieving, well, I'd like to feel that I wouldn't be in that situation any longer, because there are some golden rules really to how we set ourselves up for success. And the first golden rule, we talk about the 5 pillars in challenging coaching. And the very first one is about making sure that we build that contract. So, I'm a fan of designing relationships. So it is about, we've got a good relationship in that context, that you tell me what you need and want from me as, the director of education in CVP, and I tell you what I need and want as that skills coach. And we discuss, how we can commit to each other, but we also answer those killer questions, as I say in my Design the Relationship, which are things like, if you're not achieving, how do you want me to be with you? And I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times now, and people always generally just say, just tell me as it is, Katy. So the minute you tell somebody as it is, I wonder what reasons sometimes they can look quite frustrated or angry, or they cry. And I know that's about that other person. That isn't about my stuff. That's about me seeing that internal challenge is coming up in them personally. And that's where I have to kind of give that space for them to settle out that emotion. But also, in challenging coaching, the second pillar of the 5 pillars is to be passionately curious. So it's about asking those good questions as to why somebody's not achieving, and keeping those questions open and coming from a place of curiosity. But it's also, again, the third pillar is about trusting in the future potential of all. So it is about me not having biases as a coach or a leader to think, what is going on here, that, my perception or assumptions are right. So it is, again, making sure you're focusing on your individual. The fourth one is about letting go of statuses and outcomes. So this is really from that diversity point of view as well, just to not have that ego state about yourself. And the fifth one is speaking your truth. So it is, I develop coaches and leaders to be able to do that with courage. This is what the Challenger Coach approach is about, speaking your truth. And this is one area that I work regularly on with women wanting to rise into senior leadership positions or into exec positions, because as we kind of discussed offline earlier, there's still, a high percentage of men sitting around that boardroom table, and women are still feeling, still feeling, that they don't fit around there, or they don't deserve to be around there as much as the male counterparts.
So let's stick with that one, because obviously these coaching skills, the challenging coaching framework, is effective for any leaders for you to embed in your leadership day-to-day role. But you've used it to support some of the women execs and the women leaders that you've coached over the years. So what sort of, this is a compound question coming at you, what sort of limiting beliefs are you challenging with your women clients? And how do you go about it in a sensitive way that still challenges them?
Yeah, it's interesting because they come to our programs because they're in a place of they want the exec roles. However, they don't have the confidence. So it is a lot around the confidence to go and speak the truth. That fifth pillar that I spoke to you about, they're not certain. There's still some conditioning going on in their heads. I suppose it's the generations that we're working with. We are working with now much younger aspiring women that are now in the 20s. Those that are kind of a little bit further down the line of life, 30s and 40s, that conditioning is still within them, that they've seen maybe, their parental relationships to be a lot of them, not all of them, of course, because we have had, inspirational women leaders that have been up there and led, businesses. However, the majority of our ladies that come through the program have kind of been under the influence of having stronger male counterparts or family members that they've seen rise, but not had the experience or those mentors from the women that have been in that situation as well. So it's that confidence, it's that ability to challenge, like I said before, and that ability to be resilient enough to sit with the tension when it comes as well, which is an interesting one, without backing down and backing away, or it breaking them, or them feeling more mentally and emotionally charged, that then they start kind of questioning who they really are, their identity. But it's interesting what you said, Jasmine, because I do want to make an important point here, because by no means am I gender biased. So I do coach a lot of males as well, and I enjoy working with the males. And the challenge is we've got to get this right, because we don't want to cause an imbalance where we develop women to be more feisty and turn up that courage and that ability to be able to challenge with care. We need to do it with care, because also I'm speaking to, male counterparts now, and they're seeing the women rise, and we want them to encourage. We encourage the males to, embrace the women to go on these development journeys. And that equality is a massive, a massive factor of what I do and why I do what I do as well. So some of the males now are kind of feeling a bit conscious, and, it's impacting their confidence as well as they see the women rise.
What is it about the women rising that's making the men feel self-conscious, do you see?
Yeah, I feel it's probably, if we go back to kind of, for layman's terminologies, many years ago, the women had had the pink jobs, the men had had the blue jobs, wouldn't they, as well? And we talked about this before, didn't we? That again, they've been brought up to possibly been mentored to be the stronger gender, and be the caregivers, and be the leaders in the business industry. And we know this because there are still, in medicine, for example, there are growing numbers of female doctors and healthcare consultants, but only 15% at this current point in time. 15% of surgeons are female as well. And again, science and technology industries, in the STEM business particularly, less than 10% of managers are females. And again, in business and finance, again, in 2011, that's, a bit of an older stat, but only 9% of board members were females in the FTSE 350 and now at 40% more recently, but just 10% of the FTSE 100 CEOs are female. So overall, only 20% of directors in the UK are female. And I think it's that kind of feeling of the loss of control in business, because business probably a good few years ago was seen more as a man's world.
Okay, yeah, I get you now. So, and it makes sense. It feels almost like it's new, it's change, it's almost a threat. And I guess if we as leaders don't manage and support and mentor the men on this journey, we're at risk of causing a divide,
Absolutely,
which we don't want.
No,
I get that. But in the same time, I think I feel a bit of tension here myself. I'm going to lean into it as we're talking about this, because there's almost a part of me that's like, oh my goodness, like we get the women to where they want to be, and then we've got to do a whole load of other work to integrate the men into this new way of being. And it just feels almost like exhausting, but I get the importance of it. So what can we do to bring the men along with us?
Yeah, and it's pretty easy, really, Yasmin. Again, it's, kind of not labeling anybody and doing this together as teams. So, it's about embracing the development journey within your business and bringing everybody together. So, starting right at the top with the exec leaders and the directors and encouraging the senior leadership teams. That's how I like to go in and coach, starting at the top. So, for example, I've got a client at the moment that I'm working with in that particular way, and it's about bringing them together and about delivering the package to them to get them to look at how they lead and who they are as leaders. So it's very much about looking at personality profiles to start with, to see what kind of dynamics we've got in the teams, and then getting them to come together and contract together on what they need and want from each other, and what that compelling vision is, of course. Where are we all going to be in 5 years together? And how do we work in a way that is non-judgmental, remove the biases from who we are, and, getting to know, it's very much that self-awareness piece, isn't it? Emotional intelligence, knowing self, so that you can self-manage, and then about knowing others so that you can do that social management together. And as we know, in the Challenging Coaching book, as we do at CVP, Johari window is in there. It's about understanding what the arena is saying around you, and what those blind spots are, and what are those facades that you're not sharing because you may be too fearful to share. So it's bringing everybody together and going on a journey together.
Really, I think almost what you're explaining there is like a coaching approach to leadership, and not labeling it a woman's way of leading or a man's way of leading, just calling it what it is, something quite neutral, which is coaching. However, what I've noticed with coaching, and I don't know if you've noticed the same, certainly with our cohorts that we get on our level 5 apprenticeship, the large majority who seem to be interested in coaching, and it is dominated more by this gender, is women. And there are more women writing books, I feel, on coaching, like Jenny Rogers, Claire Pedrick. A lot of the women who are starting up like ICF and supervision training businesses are women. People who come onto the apprenticeship, large majority are women. So how can we, first of all, do you notice that in your world?
Well, it's interesting. However, I guess I'm coaching both women and men, and I enjoy coaching whoever wants to come to me for coaching, especially if it's, my niche, which is about leadership coaching and getting people to lean in to be able to be their authentic self and lead with courage, but lead with resilience, resilient courage. As you know, I'm very much into resilient leadership as well.
Yeah, I meant perhaps not the people you're coaching as coachees. I mean the people interested in training to be coaches.
Well, you are right. Our figures show that more women are actually onboarding for becoming professional coaches. However, there's quite a lot of key mentors that I work with that are males as well, because there is, for example, John and Ian that have wrote the book, and then, like you say, the grandfather of coaching, Sir John Whitmore. So I do have quite a few kind of male authors in my head that I lean into, but yeah, it probably is more highly on the feminine side.
Yeah. So how do I think we need to show its importance to the men in the workplace and get them to dedicate time and energy into upskilling themselves as coaches.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I remember dialing back and getting back in my time machine, as I share with you. If I go back to kind of 2003, 2004, when we were first introducing coaching, it was very much seen as I'm not good enough if I come to be coached. It was kind of that, and for me, that's where possibly that male strength and that male energy comes in here, that if I vulnerable enough to say I need help and support, maybe I'm going to show a side of me and open up that facade that I'm not willing to go. Recently I've been, coaching some senior leaders and execs that haven't been coached before, and they've come with curiosity. So, and once they've come with that curiosity, they've actually realised that they've enjoyed it, because they've realised it is that safe space, and it comes with no judgment, no biases. It is just about, where do you want to be? This is coaching journey is about you, and what does your best self look like? And when they realise that they've got that safety, and we do know now, and it's only been in the recent years, that leaders are realising that vulnerability is one of the top leadership skills as well. And when we show our own vulnerability, which isn't what my leaders were doing specifically in the early 2000s, that actually people see you as a human being, and people are more likely to open up back to you as well. So it's like a superpower. Yeah,
it's normalizing coaching, isn't it? Essentially in the workspace, rather than seeing it as a performance management support mechanism for underperforming staff. Actually, it should be seen more as your high performing staff are the ones who receive coaching, which makes sense, because if you are a high performer, then I guess maybe it might come naturally to you. But when you think about our sports athletes, they're all backed by amazing coaches. So yeah, we need to normalize it and see it more as a strength, a superpower than a weakness. Amazing. So just to wrap up then, let's go back to our female listeners, and we've talked very much about coaching. So I guess if anyone was interested in experiencing coaching, whether as a coachee or as a leader wanting to train up in coaching, what's like an easy first step for someone who this is quite new to?
Yeah, so the very first thing that somebody needs to do is look at where they are and where they want to be going. They just need to get very clear about what they do want out of life, and then think about, why they're wanting that. So, why is this so important to you? Because again, I want everybody that I work with to feel that they can step into their most resilient self, which, to be most resilient, they need to know about their purpose. So it's finding that purpose. However, they may employ a coach or turn to coaching because they're unsure about what that purpose is. And a coach can help them explore that if they are unsure, if they're feeling lost as well. Again, it's about that, that reflection piece around, they can look at different areas of their life and have a look at that wheel of life and think about which are the areas that they are most needing to work on, and why are they feeling that those areas are particular, so they can get really clear on the kind of coaching that they need. There are so many different coaching niches out there.
Yeah, I think because obviously me and you are in the coaching space, this answer might come more naturally to us. And also I will share your coaching details on the show notes, because obviously you do offer your coaching services in your private business. But If someone wanted to appoint a coach, I know certainly like 10 years ago, I would not know where to start apart from maybe just to Google life coach or career coach or leadership coach. What does a person do if they want to engage in coaching these days?
Yeah, if they're in a business environment, I'd really kind of encourage people to get connected on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been a great resource for me in terms of finding connections to support my own personal development, and also, gaining connections as well in terms of, for my own business, and also for CVP as well. So I'd be saying, look at kind of your different social media sites, connect with coaches, look in your local areas, because there will be coaching circles out there as well that you can reach out to. But also look within your businesses and go to your HR teams and maybe ask your HR teams, what are we doing in this business at the moment to promote coaching? And maybe if you find that, your business is a little bit behind times in creating that coaching culture, then for me, that's when they can reach out, because as you and I both know, at CVP Group, we offer the levy-funded level 5 organisational skills coach qualification, which then allows people to be coaching ambassadors within their own business and, start to change that landscape. So that would be, that would be my, I suppose, priority suggestion. Go to your own people within your business if you're interested in coaching, and perhaps this may be a new opportunity for you to think about becoming that ambassador if it's something that's piquing your interest right now.
Yeah, for sure. Because even if you get a no initially, you've planted a seed, haven't you, within the company and shown that there's a demand for it. Amazing. Katy, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're welcome. I've really enjoyed it. And I know that we probably could have spoke for about another 10 hours on this topic, Yasmin.
Oh, we certainly could, but I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thanks a lot. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. I'm always looking for disruptive women as guests. If you think you'd make a great guest or know anyone who would, then please email me with the details. You can email info@yasminarifcoaching.com. More details in today's show notes. Remember to show up and share your truth, because the world is hungry for women who show up and tell the truth, unafraid and free, expanding to the very edges of who they were always meant to be.